All right, good evening, everybody. It is a little after 5:34 p.m. on Tuesday, May the 24th, and this is a special called meeting of the Spencer Board of Aldermen for the purpose of receiving our budget presentation for fiscal year 2022-2023. And so we have all of our board members present tonight. We'll begin with an invocation. Father, we thank you so much for all that you have given us, and especially for the many gifts and talents within this town. We thank you for servant leadership throughout this town and the many ways in which we get to witness that on a daily basis. We thank you for our citizens and our businesses. We thank you for our town staff. And I thank you for these elected officials that sit beside of me. Please grant us wisdom and discernment as we receive the budget presentation for the upcoming fiscal year. Help us to be wise with our decisions. Help us to be smart with the way that we consider use of our taxpayer funds and revenue. And please be with us in all that we do to serve this town. Amen. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, with that, I'm going to turn it over to our town manager to give his budget presentation for the upcoming fiscal year. Mr. Franzese.
Thank you very much, Mayor and members of the board. I don't know how it's already a whole nother year since a year ago when I got to do this for the first time with you. So the time went by fast. Here we are getting ready for the next fiscal year, but we're excited about what lies ahead. And it's been a very good process working with y'all and with the staff to get this recommendation ready. So what I'd like to do tonight is walk you through the recommendation, and we're happy to answer questions if you have any. I'll say the process after tonight will involve a workshop at your pre-agenda in June. You'll also have a public hearing at your regular meeting in June, and you would be free to adopt a budget anytime after that, but it does need to be adopted prior to the end of June. And so that's kind of the steps going forward. Looking back, this budget was prepared based on the guidance from the town's strategic plan and from our planning session that we held a few months back. And of course, you will recall we had a workshop in April where we previewed some elements of this. And I certainly appreciate, again, the staff's efforts in putting this recommendation together. They did a very good job of putting the requests in and working with us to get us to the level of a balanced budget. And for the upcoming fiscal year, the overall town budget is going to be just over $5 million, with about 4.8 of that in the general fund and a Powell bill fund of 169,000 as recommended. This recommendation also maintains the existing property tax rate of 65.5 cents per $100 of valuation. We've been through a lot over the last 2 years. We've been through a lot together as a community, and of course the pandemic brought challenges, but we've emerged from it and we've been able to proceed and accomplish quite a lot over that time. The pandemic has also now brought an opportunity for local governments across the country in the form of the American Rescue Plan and the funding that's been allocated to over 19,000 units of local government. Spencer's allocation for that is just over $1 million. We talked about that in April, about the approach for how those funds could support staff salaries through a revenue replacement model, and then freeing up our local revenues to accomplish some of the items that we've talked about in terms of the supplanted funds concept. And so, overall, the budget was a very positive experience in terms of where we're seeing our revenues. The current year, our revenues are coming in better than expected, and they're ahead of our expenditures. And we are expecting continued modest revenue growth in the last few years. We also have had some significant investments that we've made over the last few years in terms of investments in staff and investments in for example, this facility here, the new town hall and police department. As we talked about, this recommendation does program in a structural adjustment to our pay plan to remain competitive in the market. We programmed in a 5% structural increase to the pay plan overall. That would also provide a similar increase to existing staff salaries. It does continue the developmental increase program as well for staff, and the first of 30 annual debt service payments on our USDA loan for this building. And we're expecting that we're going to end the current fiscal year with about $200,000 in revenues over expenditures. This budget recommendation recommends appropriating that back into the budget with another additional amount from fund balance to help budget. It also factors in some capital, some items designated for capital out of fund balance, and of course the effect of use of the ARPA funds. And so, as you're looking through the budget message, which starts on about page 6 of the document, it then on page 7 goes into our discussion of revenues. You'll see there under the property tax revenue that we got an estimate from Rowan County that we're going to have about 3.79% increase on taxable value over the current year. And so that will represent a increase in our property tax revenues. And we are anticipating the consistency on the collection rate of 97.75%. And then on sales tax, there's been a strong increase once again, year over year, from where we are now to where we were a year ago in sales tax revenues. We get those projections from the League of Municipalities, and we're estimating that at and based on not just estimates, but what we're getting, on a regular basis. The trend is about 15% increase in sales tax, and the projections for the next year are that it'll go up another 3.75% from where we are now. So we've identified growth in those two funding areas, and we've also anticipating in terms of our revenues growth in other areas. Some development fees we expect to go up due to the increased development that we're seeing. We're also anticipating for the first time in a while some interest income. The town's fund balance is being invested, and the last few years we really didn't budget much in terms of interest off of that investment, but we do anticipate about a $16,000 revenue for investments in the coming fiscal year based on what we're seeing now, which is positive. Any questions overall on revenues?
Any questions from the board?
Is the 3.8% increase in property tax, is that pre-valuation, or is that based on what they expect the valuation to be?
No, that's based on in terms of the property revaluation. Yeah. No, that's based on the current value. So okay. This time next year, the budget recommendation you'll receive will be factoring in the revaluation process. The process is happening right now. They're doing the work, and they will in January provide the updated values as of January 1, 2023. and then the budgets that take effect July of 2023 will be put together based on those values.
But essentially what we're seeing with that 3.79, that's new development that's happening right now, which is positive. But we do anticipate that Rowan County anticipates that the reevaluation process will lead to a significant increase in property values.
Do we know, I'm sure Rowan County knows this generally, but I don't know if they've shared this with you or with Spencer specifically, where are we relative to projected? So under 90, under 92, 87, in terms of relative to tax to value, current value, do we know where we are?
We haven't received any, I've heard murmurings out there about how things are going, but we haven't received anything official in terms of the reval process. I think they're still got a ways to go with that.
It's all been anecdotal, kind of really high level information, but obviously they contract with a third-party firm to come in and do that reevaluation process, and so we really won't know the details until then.
And of course, part of that process is by law. The recommendation next year will require me to provide you a revenue neutral tax rate. So that means you'll likely see that be some lower number than the 65.5 cents. Will likely be a revenue neutral rate. There may be a different tax rates that's recommended than that, that allows us to perhaps capture some of the revenue growth without going to the extreme of, for example, leaving our tax rate as it is. So there's the finding the balance there in putting the recommendation together to get the appropriate amount of revenue to support the services we need to provide.
Any other questions?
We talked at the workshop in April about the American Rescue Plan, state and local fiscal recovery funds, and Spencer's allocation and the approach going into that. That is described in the document. I don't know if you would like to hear more about that. The supplanted funds project ideas listing is on page 8. It's been revised slightly since the last time you saw it. But it does give an overview of the kinds of things that could be accomplished through the supplanted funds over the next several years. And the number of those are things that are programmed into this recommendation, which totals over $500,000 into this budget recommendation coming from those supplanted funds.
And I do want to point out, a couple of the things to the board as we had a discussion when we first saw the presentation on some of these. We talked about, priorities and prioritizing, certain projects over another, and whether that be the fire truck versus fire station expansion design versus 17th Street stormwater improvement design. What you'll see is this proposed use of the funds still maintains all of those projects. The more and more I've thought about it personally, I think they're all critical needs, and it's really kind of tough for us to put one above the other. And I think what this does do is allows us to be much farther down the road in the process with these important projects than we have ever been. And I think that's a step in the right direction, as opposed to just picking one or picking two out of the three, that sort of thing. So I think these are all critical needs, and I for one am glad to see that we're maintaining each of those to go ahead and push those along in the process. And we've got a staff that's been incredibly successful and worked very, very hard to bring in outside funding opportunities for these types of projects. And I think, this is obviously something I'm sure that we'll continue to work towards, to be able to actually fund some of the construction of some of these projects and some of these capital needs. The other thing I want to point out for the board is, we did have money programmed in, I think, for our business grant program. And what you'll see is this has changed a bit. And the title is now Business Incubator Program. And this goes back to the visit and the discussions that we've had relative to a business incubator, and partnering with the Rowan Chamber and also with Rowan County, to really move this initiative forward. It's an initiative countywide that they've had, and it just didn't quite work out how they originally envisioned it several years ago. But what we've expressed to those folks is that we have a very, very strong need here in our community for a program that can provide workspace for startup businesses, and that can also offer programs that really work to mentor and train these business owners, these starting entrepreneurs, so that as they grow, that they can be successful. The last thing that we want in Spencer is to have businesses that come in and that don't have the resources and support and the business acumen, and that, open up and within a year they've shut up shop. What we want are businesses that are going to come in, that they're going to be a part of the community, that they're going to grow within the community, and ideally that eventually they grow beyond our community. And so what we have done, we toured the Business Incubator program that they have in Concord. They have a similar model in Winston-Salem. And so we are evaluating that and looking for how we can start that, to really support business growth. And it wouldn't just be new businesses, because the model that we've looked at actually provides public seminars and classes so that any of our business owners can come in and take advantage of those resources to strengthen their own existing businesses. So this is a really, really neat opportunity for us. We have a lot of community backing in the chamber, and so we're exploring that, starting to plan for what that might look like. But this would provide essentially what would be seed funding from the town of Spencer that then we could leverage to secure funding from other folks like the county and the chamber, to really get this thing started and off the ground. And so one of the things we've talked about is potential use of our lease space for this type of business incubator program. So, we're stepping up in this way, and I think if we step up in this way, it's going to cause a lot of other folks throughout the Rowan County community that want to be a part of this and partner with us to step up from a financial standpoint as well.
That's good. That's good.
Would we partner too with Rowan Tech for any training or anything like that?
Yeah, and so this is a little different. So there's the workforce development
Right.
piece, and that's what Rowan Cabarrus is really working towards. And I think there's definitely some natural synergy there and partnership that we can work towards. But this then is really tied back specifically to entrepreneurial business, starting folks that are starting businesses that really don't have this, can't afford or aren't ready to have their own space per se. That this provides them a smaller space, that there's not that capital investment for them necessarily up front, and it makes sure that they have the courses and the resources they need for starting businesses. So when you ask about the colleges, I think it goes beyond maybe even Rowan Cabarrus. You talk about Catawba and their business school and things like that. I think they're in Livingston as well. There are lots of opportunities. I think what you're going to see is if we can get something like this off the ground, the amount of connections and ways that it's kind of like a spider web, the effect this is going to have throughout the community, I think is going to be huge. And it's not just here in Spencer, but to have Spencer as ground zero would be really, really beneficial, I think.
Would that take away tax revenue for rental of, or would there be a rental, or are we not even far enough along?
I don't think we're far enough along to know what the kind of the implications of that would be. I think it could be looked at one of either way, really. But I would say if you had something like this, and we've even talked about how that might tie in with a nonprofit incubator space, even if you're not pulling in rent off of that, the service that it's doing to the community and the eventual tax base that it's going to generate from a property tax and sales tax basis, I think will far outweigh any of that. But those are details that are farther down the road to be worked out. What I'll say too is I know the Nances and others were able to tour that as well, so they were able to see how that could then potentially benefit other areas, other rental areas within town, that as those business owners grow, can then move into one of these other available properties that we have. Anyway, I know I know that's a lot on this one item, but it's something I think that we hadn't quite gotten the board up to speed with some of the stuff we've looked into here over the last month and a half or so.
And one other interesting anecdote with that, I got a call yesterday from Barbie Jones, who's president of the chamber in Cabarrus County, because she had seen the announcement from the Duke Energy Foundation for this year's round of their grant program that we through the Salisbury CDC were able to supplement our commercial grant program this year. And so and that announcement specifically pointed out Spencer as an example. I think there were 30 grantees, and it mentioned us in one other place as an example. So she gave me a call to find out what we were up to with that, and I had a good conversation with her because she was trying to find a way to do something to support businesses there with this program, and it was just neat to hear that they're looking to Spencer for ideas. So kudos to Spencer for
That's good. That's really good.
raising the bar there.
Yeah, I think the mentality that we need to embrace is, we want to attract businesses. Equally as important, we want to support our existing businesses. But more important than any of that is, I think we want to make grow our own businesses, right? So it's one thing to bring in an established business, that's great. But how great is it if we can actually say that these businesses have started here? As Elaine Spalding from the chamber has said, she said that with this concept, what we're really looking for is to find that next food line, right, for Rowan County. Or stand back. And so, I think we owe it to the community as a board to embrace the vision and provide the seed for it and the support for it and nurture it, and then watch what happens and watch what grows. I think it's going to be really, really something really special.
Okay, thank you. And so moving into some highlights for personnel and staff, the recommendation, as I mentioned, does have some structural adjustments to the pay plan, developmental increase program continuing, and so on. It also does recommend a holiday bonus to be paid in December, a lump sum of $800 for each full-time staff, and flat lump of $400 for part-time staff. Some volunteers and part-time police and fire also qualify for that based on eligibility requirements that are in our personnel policy. It also funds the continuance of our town's benefit program for full-time staff, which I'll say is one of our strongest things that we offer for a recruitment standpoint. We should be very proud of the benefits we're able to offer our staff related to health coverage, retirement, and so on. So that's also supported through the budget recommendation. Some other notable adjustments personnel-wise is the first I'd like to talk about is the full-time staffing in our fire department. Of course, we made an adjustment a few months back and have, as of May, some full-time staff covering our shifts for the fire department, our 3 full-time fire lieutenants that are providing 24/7 coverage, working 48-hour shifts. That's going well so far, and this budget recommendation does fund, of course, that for the next coming year, and that's a major step forward for the town. It also makes modifications to the part-time coverage that went in line with the changes we implemented in May. It provides an increase to the part-time rates in terms of what they're paid a consistent hourly rate, and there's an increase to remain competitive in the market to that hourly rate for part-timers, and then also establishes a part-time deputy chief position. We've had a deputy chief position previously. At one point, we had an assistant chief and a deputy chief, and they've been a variety of volunteer or other positions. This allows for a part-time deputy chief to assist in the leadership of the department along with the lieutenants, and allow the fire chief to focus on some overall issues and have some other leaders in place for some of the day-to-day issues. And it's also a good adjustment in terms of career progression in some ways for folks who are wanting to move through their time with our department. Also, in terms of enhancing customer service in town hall, we currently have a part-time office assistant role that we believe would better serve the community through a transition to a full-time role. So the recommendation includes adding additional responsibilities to the role that would allow us to recruit a professional with capacity to not only support our finance team, but also planning staff. Some examples being processing some of our permit processes, maybe something like event permits and dumpster permits. Some of the items that require less technical capacity on reviews could be handled at that level and free up staff time for our planners. And also administrative support for the appointed boards like the Historic Preservation Commission, Planning and Zoning Board, and so on. That office assistant position could provide support for those boards and allow our staff planners to focus on the planning and zoning administration and long range planning, and use their time in that way rather than some of the more administrative duties. I'd like to move into some of the general recommendations, moving through some of our departments, if that's okay.
Any questions on personnel highlights?
What's the new retirement plan, that 457B? What is that?
So that is an option that is available through the same, the name Prudential used to provide the North Carolina Retirement 401k and it's now been taken over by another entity. I can't remember the name. Empower, yes. They bought out Prudential's retirement business. And so they offer not just the 401k product, but a 457B product, which is, I believe it's more similar to a Roth.
You can do Roth or not. It's more so part-time. Full-time.
So this is it's an option that enables more folks to be able to participate in retirement programs, and there's really no cost to the town. It's just an option that individuals can elect to participate in, so it's a good extra benefit to add on. Yeah. And certainly thank Stacy because she's the one who got that all lined up with our representatives. So she did a good job on that. Any other questions?
Okay.
All right. So in terms of some of the key recommendations in the governing body, we did talk about the seed funding for the business incubator concept. We're valuing that at $25,000. And of course, that's one of the items we would apply some planning funds to cover. Continuing the support of our key partners like the Rowan EDC, Central Carolina Regional Council, North Carolina League of Municipalities, and so on. The Vintage Sign Restoration Program, recommending continuance of that into the next year. Now, we originally had programmed that at a $5,000 level for the current year, thinking it would take several years to work through that program. Of course, Sky Allen, our lead North Carolina fellow, was successful in $20,000 of grant funding, and so we're going to be able to move along with that much quicker. And so that may not be as, in terms of sign restoration, it may not be as many years as we originally thought, which is great. But we do recommend some additional funding in the coming year to go along with what was achieved with the grants in the current year. A staff, board, and volunteer appreciation event. We think that would be a great addition to what we're doing. I'll say the Rowan Dragon Boat Festival is coming up, and I think that's an opportunity in June that we can get a lot of folks involved and have some team building and some appreciation built into that in the next few months. But I think what this is talking about is some sort of event to bring everybody together, whether they're serving on an appointed board, a volunteer for the community garden, our staff, our elected officials, some sort of event that we can enjoy some fellowship together, and that's what that's recommending there. Also, some initiatives for both the Community Appearance Commission and the Historic Preservation Commission, continuing each of their $10,000 level grant programs that were set up this year is included in that recommendation. But there are several other items that were requested by those groups that were accommodated in this recommendation. And then continued support of local tourism and events, including the marketing support for the North Carolina Transportation Museum and sponsorship of Winterfest. You'll see the amount noted for that overall category is $26,000. And just for your, just to give you a little more detail on that, the North Carolina Transportation Museum did request $3,000, so that's what's in the recommendation. Also, $20,000 for Winterfest. That puts the town of Spencer at the top level sponsorship. That group is trying to go out and have several sponsors at that level and beyond. So that's included in the recommendation. $1,000 to go towards a National Night Out event. We had a very successful National Night Out last August and planning to do that again. Last year, much of the event was provided through donations and sponsorships. So it may be that we're able to achieve some of that again this year and not need to use that $1,000, but we wanted to program that in to ensure we could plan accordingly for the event. And then just a $2,000 general amount to cover other events that come up as needed. And that's where then the total of $26,000 came from.
Is the senior event included in that amount?
Those are programmed in the recreation budget. The senior council gets about $6,000 per year in the recreation budget to fund those events that are put on. And then the events that get programmed through the library have a separate budget within the library budget for events. So these are kind of the core events that you're supporting other partners or we're organizing here out of the town hall.
On the North Carolina Transportation Museum, $3,000. I know they requested $6,000 for fireworks this coming year. Is that right?
I believe it was the $3,000 was the request.
$3,000?
Yeah. So
okay.
if you recall, it was pre-COVID. It was $5,000,
Okay.
and we ended up giving them $2,500, I believe.
Yeah.
And so the request this year is
For
$3,000.
$3,000. So this what's really that's covering the fireworks for this coming up. Now.
Well, it would be for the next year. For this amount would be.
Okay.
I
got you. I got you.
Right.
Although I'm sorry, I guess if we're talking about fireworks in July, then. But we had funding for them in the current year budget, and I don't know that they've invoiced us yet for that. So which one gets applied, which fiscal year gets applied for this upcoming event? We'll have to check. I think last year's was not for fireworks, of course, so they didn't do it, but they were looking for general marketing support.
That's what that was. Yeah.
We'll circle back with them and make sure we cover all our bases. Okay, in administration, which is our town hall group, and that includes everybody on this side of the building, and that does include the planning staff as well. Some highlights include, of course, I mentioned already the pay plan, continuing the implementation of our pay plan and the developmental increase program. I've noted an amount there of $41,500. That's not all within the administration budget, but just to give you a scope of what the developmental increase program costs per year. Technology improvements, we've programmed to continue replacing PCs as needed, and software, specifically with software in the coming year, we're wanting to add some new HR and recruiting software to help us streamline the process, enhance our ability for online recruiting and that sort of thing. The debt service, I mentioned that previously. The first debt service payment will be due in the spring of 2023. It's an annual payment. So the debt service is about $128,000 per year. That's less than we originally thought it was going to be, which is good. A second year of our Lead for North Carolina Fellow. That is a mostly subsidized program, but the local cost for that would be just shy of $19,000. Of course, when your fellow brings in $20,000 of grants, it's clear that, that's good math. But that would we're fortunate to have been a participant in that program this year. We've enjoyed having Sky, and we're glad that she wants to spend another year with us. She will be taking a break in July, just so everybody knows. She's, as part of the AmeriCorps requirements, they may not work 12 months out of the year. So she'll be with us through June. She'll take a break in July. She'll be back with us in August, which is good. She deserves to have a break. And another note about the Fellows program is East Spencer is going to be receiving a fellow next year as well. They're going to be a host site, and I think Landis might as well. So it's pretty neat that we're going to have 3 fellows in Rowan County next year. Noted $20,000 for engineering services. We believe the trends we're seeing in development require us to make sure that we have on-call contracts in place with engineering firms to help us review transportation utility related items as the development review process comes in. Steve may get a plan, and of course, as planning and zoning administrator, he's supposed to verify certain things, setbacks, and things related to the structures and the lots, and but we shouldn't necessarily expect him to review a stormwater culvert design. And while we do have a mayor with expertise in that area, we shouldn't necessarily ask him to take that on as well. So thanks. Yeah. So that's what that's about, as well as we think an on-call related to recreation engineering as well would be helpful. We've done that on a project by project basis recently with, for example, the Yadkin River Trailhead and the town hall, the town park process. And we think we can put out some RFQs that are more categorically based. And then when projects come along, we've already identified the firms that we want to work with in these areas. And so we would use a qualifications-based selection process, though, to set those up front. And of course, you'll see there also noted the full-time office assistant, as I already described. Within our police department, a number of technology upgrades, computer replacements, equipment replacement, software, funds for nuisance abatements and code enforcement as needed, supplies and equipment for officers, and then one of the largest item you see here is replacing 3 older patrol vehicles with 2 new vehicles. So that's some interesting math if you think about it. But we do have some older vehicles in the fleet that we have one officer who actually uses 2 vehicles, one for the take-home vehicle, and then which is an older one, and then a newer one for here in town, and that helps keep the mileage down on the vehicles. But it's also 2 vehicles to keep up with the maintenance on the older vehicles. Sergeant File and I have talked about fleet quite a bit over the last few months, and he's got some innovative ideas when it comes to fleet and really projecting out more of life cycle costs that by getting on more of a replacement program and not hanging on to older vehicles, you not only save maintenance costs, but you get more out of the vehicles when it's time to auction them off. We've auctioned off a few very old vehicles and gotten a surprising amount out of them. But if you were to put them on the market, with much less mileage, at times there's been examples that he's described where you almost come out ahead on auctioning off a used vehicle with minimal mileage. And by minimal, I mean, it's getting to the 100,000 mile range. I don't know, Sergeant File, if you want to talk any more about that, if there's any other points about, this concept with vehicle replacement, may be helpful.
I'd strongly recommend a fleet of 1964 Chevy 2 Novas. I have 593,000 miles on mine.
Well, I'm thinking if we can find a few of them, I may take you up on that. Yeah, just very briefly, we have had, speaking about the vehicle situations, everybody knows there's a lot of vehicles. I've been asked a question before why we have so many vehicles in the back parking lot. The unfortunate part is they keep breaking down on us. So we keep having to take one and get one fixed and let an officer move into another vehicle to fix it. And that's just inherently the problem that we've been fighting for a number of years now. So we have one vehicle that's totally beyond economical repair currently. That's one of the 3 that we're talking about decommissioning. Additionally, the other officer, Peter was speaking of, so we've been having to move him around between 2 vehicles that each vehicle has in excess of 150,000 miles on it. But if we left him in one dedicated one and it dies, then we're down to 1 and then we have none. So that's kind of the situation we're in now. But yeah, ultimately it's something we'll definitely probably talk about in the future. But there are some really good examples of purchasing these vehicles off the state contract bid for the mid $30,000 range currently. And if we start eliminating them out of our fleet at the 80 to 100,000 mile range, with the way used vehicles are selling right now, there are agencies that are getting nearly $30,000 back out of those vehicles with 100,000 or between 80 and 100,000 on it. So our maintenance costs would go to basically nothing, and we would keep good-looking vehicles on the road. We've actually already worked with a dealership that is willing to detail those vehicles at a very minimal cost and have them looking like something you see on a lot when they have that 80 to 100,000 mile range. So that's a few years up the road. We're still kind of chasing the tail end of it right now, but this is definitely a start to kind of getting back on track with it. And one of the vehicles, obviously, that's getting ready to come in, it's actually set for delivery on June 8th, is the replacement for the totaled vehicle. So to kind of put it in perspective, we made more in the total vehicle than what it cost in the state contract. So that kind of tells you how the numbers work out purchasing off state contract versus what we'll get in whenever we get to sell the vehicle.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
On average, I know this is rough, but on average, how many miles do the cars average each year being put on?
It kind of depends on the officer. Obviously, a very aggressive, active officer that's on the street all the time moving is going to be more. Kind of overall for the fleet, we're averaging about 12,000 miles per vehicle per year. Some of them may be upwards towards 20. You may have some like the SROs that may be lower in the 8,000 or 9,000 mile range. So I want to say I'm going way back in my mind here. I think we ran about 156,000 miles in a year over the entire fleet. It's kind of what we're destined to drive typically.
Thank you.
Does the state still do their confiscation programs where they, confiscate vehicles under the, for drug violations, and then, bring them up to snuff and put them back, or donate them to police departments? Is that still
I believe some
a program
organizations.
that's still done?
Yeah, I believe there are some organizations that benefit from that, but I think that's more state level organizations that get those vehicles.
Okay.
I know there are some that are utilized like in an undercover capacity. Maybe a Grand Cherokee that gets assigned out to some state agency to drive, but we don't typically see that on the local level.
Okay.
About the only ones we ever have the access to get is through like the federal program, and typically those are more retired military vehicles, which are usually in pretty bad shape.
Yeah,
So we kind of put us back behind, behind the 8 ball on that as far as that goes. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving into the fire department, we did talk already about the staffing, but that's certainly a key recommendation, continuing what we've started on our staffing program with full-time coverage. You can also see in there uniforms and equipment. That's an area where we have increased the budget some to provide adequate both uniforms for staff, but also the safety gear, turnout gear, and those sorts of things. There's an enhanced level of outreach materials. You recall at your last meeting, there was a state grant that provided about $9,000 or $10,000 for public outreach materials. This recommendation doesn't quite go as much as what that grant was worth, but it lets us keep up with the materials, and those are things you heard the fire chief describe: hats and items that can be passed out at events to connect with young people and people of all ages, and make sure folks are keeping safety in mind. Required testing of some of our equipment is programmed in, and then the station design. That's a need that's been out there, and through the supplanted funds, we believe there's an opportunity to move ahead with that project in terms of getting a design accomplished for what the station addition would look like. Of course, as things evolve in the future with town and potential growth happens, there may be a need one day for another station. And so I think as we're proceeding through that station design, the station addition design process, we should keep that in mind, that there may be some needs that can be accomplished through a future station someday down the road. And we may want to keep some flexibility in certain things as we're planning that. Any questions about fire department? Okay, in Public Works, you'll see something I want to spend a little bit of time on. And I think you've heard Joel Taylor talk about our older garbage truck is not in good condition at the moment, and we do need to plan to buy a new one so that we don't depend on just one truck. Of course, our crews are providing garbage service over 3 days, bulky waste collection as well, and then yard waste collection on top of quite a few other things. But if you think about the vehicles required for just what I described, just depending on one garbage truck can put you in a tricky situation sometimes, because the equipment doesn't always it needs, sometimes things happen and the equipment needs to be repaired, and it's important to have a backup to keep the services rolling. So this recommendation includes the replacement of a garbage truck and using about $80,000 of our supplanted funds for a down payment and financing the rest. And what we're recommending is not just replacing the truck, but also changing the way we provide the service by replacing with a side load automated truck. That would allow a one-person operation. It would remove having two people hanging off the back of the truck, which presents a safety issue at times. And it would.
I can tell you from experience, having ridden on the back of a fire truck and getting drugged one night. So, yeah, it does reduce that considerably.
And there's challenges associated with that because the way Spencer is laid out and designed, the streets can be tight, and there's going to be some education involved with making sure people understand what they need to do for our automated truck collection process to work. And it also relates into the issues we've talked about with parking, for example. So it's not just, how you put your items out, meaning everything's got to be in the cart for it to be collected. But also you can't block it with a car. The arm can't go through cars to pick up the truck, so there's going to be some education involved in that process.
Let me ask you a question on that.
Yeah.
Now, you're actually saving two people basically with the new style truck, basically, but we're not cutting back on the public works staff.
No, and so the recommendation here is really not to make any changes this coming fiscal year. This would be working towards a change for fiscal year 24.
Right.
That we would purchase the truck in the second half of the year, be able to get it in, start training, and work towards a July of 2023 service change. Those other two crew members would then be able to be allocated for other duties within public works, which is important because we see the opportunity and the need for other duties.
Well, and we keep hearing about being short-staffed,
Yeah.
as it is.
Yeah.
But you would still have one truck you were depending on, is that correct?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
I said you would still have one truck that you're counting on, but it would be a new truck.
Well, we have a newer rear loader truck already.
Oh, okay.
And so that would be able to serve as a backup. It would be able to handle bulk waste. Yes, so it wouldn't be that we have two trucks, and right now our older truck is about time to put it out to pasture. And so what's currently our newer truck would move to more of a backup. And yes, but this is going to be a process, an educational process for everyone involved. But I think it's important for us to be able to be more efficient. I'll say, and if you ever seen these things in action, a side load truck can probably, on average, be stopped for 10 to 15 seconds, easy, and move on. That's not how the rear loaders work. Every single house, they're there for probably a minute. And if you think about what that means in terms of not just safety, but efficiency, the time it takes to complete the route, and so on, it's going to allow us to really have a lot more capacity to provide the service. One thing that Joel has mentioned is our routes. Right now, we're over 3 days for garbage collection. And one of those days it's a long day. There's a lot more houses to pick up. And so the other part of the education is likely going to be a rebalancing of routes. So not only will the requirements for how we want you to put your items out change, but your day may change as well. But that's a good time to do all that together and make sure everybody understands. And so that is also part of the recommendation is to put together an educational campaign to make sure the community understands not just that what this looks like and how and what to do, but why it's important, and make sure everybody understands why we're suggesting this change. So that's kind of a big item that I wanted to spend a few minutes with you on and introduce and put it out there for your consideration. But certainly the staff recommends that as an important step forward in our collection service.
Any thoughts about recycling?
Just get ready to sign.
Yeah, that's a whole nother ball of wax. It's another truck, another crew. The recycling market has presented challenges in recent years that Local governments have been getting out of the curbside collection business because it's not been as self-sustaining or as revenue producing. It was never self-sustaining, but it's been more of a cost than ever due to the market forces.
So what you're seeing is a lot of municipalities are going to contracted services, similar to what Salisbury did with, I think they use waste services or waste management for theirs. But in doing that, they are paying for that service. It's not, it's not a moneymaker. It's not a cost neutral.
And I know, for example, in Granite Quarry, there was curbside recycling service for about 10 years or so, and it stopped a couple years ago because it just wasn't workable anymore financially for the town. So I think there's examples like that elsewhere. And so to take a step back, recycling is an important part of taking care of our natural resources. We do have the convenience centers in place, including the one here at Public Works, but Rowan County also provides several, and so it's part of it is important in making sure people make use of those, and it's even more important with the ideas around the side loader, because you can't just pile bags and bags and bags of trash. The trash needs to fit in the cart, and it's really important to separate your recyclables and to take them to the convenience center. And at the end of the day, you wind up, it works a lot better for everybody involved. It takes a little effort on the part of the community, but they're doing their part to conserve resources. It's saving the town a lot in terms of disposal costs. There's a lot of reasons to encourage recycling.
So, on that note, one of the things I would like to see us consider is, when it comes to recycling, is making it more accessible to our residents. If we're not going to do curbside, and part of that accessibility comes with the hours of operation for our current convenience center, open till I believe 3 o'clock on weekdays, and then only open on basically first and third Saturdays, and only open until noon, I believe, 1. I think there's an area for improved customer service for us to find a way to enhance those hours. The other issue with that is it's all the way out on, and the hours vary. So it is out of sight, out of mind, but it's not readily accessible to a lot of our residents.
A lot of people don't even know about it either. And that'd be a nice thing to put in the newsletter. Sometime a little blurb about it, how it works, and how it works, where you go and what you do now. Because I have people ask me about that all the time, and why we don't have a recycling program. I said we do.
Yeah.
Well, and we don't even have a sign out on 29 going toward the river that tells us where the recycle center is.
So, maybe that's the low-hanging fruit,
at
least for the upcoming fiscal years, to look at ways to make that more accessible to our residents. And
do like I do, go down to Steve's house at about 10 o'clock at night and just throw it out the window.
I come by your house and toss things.
That's true. Okay. Anything else on that? One of the things I did want to say to the board is, we've heard about some of these vehicle replacements, and this is something I think we've talked for several years about, and the importance of getting on a cycle to where we're actually replacing them with intentionality, that we're not just waiting until they fall apart and die to replace them, because then you don't get any money out of them. That way we always have reliable equipment, efficient equipment. And so I think, this is a step in the right direction towards making sure that we've got functional equipment, that our employees are safe in using it. And, hopefully from a fuel economy standpoint, some of those things, we can look at ways to continue to be more efficient there too, because fuel costs obviously are only getting worse. Okay. anything else on Public Works related to the trash collection?
So the other public works items as highlights include the design for the 17th Street Stormwater project. That's another one of the ARPA supplanted funds ideas. We would continue our enhanced maintenance, recreation maintenance funding that's provided through the Standback endowment for the Standback Educational Forest. And then in terms of the Yadkin River Trailhead, the budget does program in $71,000 to achieve full closure of any funding gap that may occur as the project goes out to bid.
Can I add to that real quickly? So that's based on the 71,000 as the potential funding gap based on the architect's current cost estimate for the project. Construction market is incredibly volatile right now, but what I will say is what we have seen working in that industry is, at least over the last year to year and a half, what we are seeing are engineers' estimates are typically coming in considerably higher than the bid prices are coming in. That's not across the board, but consultants are adding a lot of contingency and a lot of unknowns into those estimates, because the last thing in the world that a consulting engineer or architect wants to be is the low bidder on a project. So that 71,000 could be more, but it could very, very likely be considerably less than that.
We'll cross our fingers for the second thought on that.
Quick question on
Yep.
on the stormwater thing. I don't know a lot about that. I know we talked about it a meeting or two ago. Actually, when we were doing the cleanup on Saturday, we drove down through there, and I was kind of trying to figure out what the problem is, and I have. But I guess my only concern is going back to what we talked about in a meeting or two ago. We've got fire extension, and we're doing this. Are we running a risk of spending good money on designs that we will not be able to use because we can't do two projects? I'm just asking, and it's not because I don't think this needs to get done. I know just by hearing you talk, it must be pretty bad. But can we legitimately? I mean, what's the plan to get both of these done? If we, because once we sink this money, it's gone. So is that? I mean, what's the plan there, or what do you think?
Can I give a little bit of background on this? Obviously, to kind of get you up to speed with the issues. I know most of our board is familiar with them. Rashid, I think you're very familiar with them. So basically, anytime there is a heavy rain, 17th Street floods. Property owners' yards flood. Luckily, there's really not a lot of structural flooding or anything like that happens, but it is a major nuisance to the property owners. From a property value standpoint, it's an issue. But more importantly, from an emergency access standpoint, there are times when our public works crews and our fire department, emergency police, they are not able to get through that road because it has flooded. It's been an ongoing issue for years and years and years, and it's something I think that over time folks have committed to trying to fix, and it hasn't been fixed.
Yeah. It's the proverbial kick the can down the road. Well, the can is not going to be kicked down.
It's too heavy.
And I think that's what this board, and recent boards have inherited a lot of those things that have been major historical issues.
Amen
that
to
the
that.
can has been kicked down the road, and I think that's one of the things that we've tried to make a commitment as a board is to stop kicking cans down the road and address them. And that's one of the things with this the ARPA money is. Now is there's a way to start to address some of these issues. And, I was one thinking that we did need to prioritize last meeting. The more and more I've thought about it, these are significant investments that get us a significant ways down the road, especially on this, to have the design developed. Yes, designs can age to the point that you have to go back and do updates, but my thought is, those are typically several years, And so, what we're doing with these designs are getting them through a process that typically takes a year to a year and a half, that then allows us some time to figure out which of these we move forward with construction first. The other thing I'll point out is I think it's going to be imperative for all of these projects that we are seeking grants, similar to what we've been doing. We've got a really good track record of that so far. And so I would hate for us not to move some of these projects forward that we've committed for years and years and years to our citizens. And when we have an opportunity and miss that opportunity, knowing that we have the potential to really offset a lot of our costs by these grants. So it's one of those things that's strike while the iron is hot. And I think the iron is very, very hot right now, and we've got the funding to be able to move the needle forward on these.
And particularly on the 17th Street project, we do believe there are significant grant opportunities out there that will be able to assist with the construction phase.
The other thing is, from a natural timing standpoint, we've got the Ccap project, and so I know that it's a little confusing. Ccap project is basically the open channel area that is basically down to Standback Forest at the bottom of the hill. Basically, those open channel areas, to regrade those and do that work, it's going to help downstream. This project that we're talking about is all the enclosed piping and basically upstream of that. And so part of this is, if you're going to do part of it, and we've already got the funding through Ccap to do it, it's been designed, let's go ahead and move forward and address the whole issue and not piecemeal.
Okay, so then moving to the library, we're planning a PC replacement at the library, continuing the monthly programs that happen there and annual events. And perhaps most significantly is exterior maintenance, which in the current year we have funding for exterior painting. We talked about oil-based primer. We're still trying to work through that, but we do have the funds encumbered with the contractor, so that when the materials are ready, this year's funding will go towards the exterior painting that we planned, and then for next year, moving ahead with the idea of a window replacement for the library, and of course that would need to go through, of course, our Historic Preservation Commission. Make sure we're handling that process appropriately. We'll certainly do that, and but that will result hopefully in windows that are not only more energy efficient, but that don't have some of the painting maintenance issues that we currently have. This is another item where the ARPA funds we are able to support that.
I'm just glad to see a $53,000 cost and not a $1.8 million cost, like I saw on the paper today.
Yeah.
That's a lot more windows.
Yeah.
Yep.
I still wonder about the 53,000.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a good point. One question I had was, there's been some requests over the past year or so about signage at the library, specifically denoting that it is a dispenser library, because right now I believe it just has Spencer School.
I was there. I was going through the area recently, and I actually noticed some signage that I think may be covered up with some vegetation. There's the walls that you walk through, and I think there's actually some signage saying it's the library, and perhaps another sign talking about the fundraising project that happened. I think those may be obscured, but I did notice that the other day. I didn't get to take a close look, but from going by, it occurred to me that I think that it may exist, but so that's an update I have on that.
Okay.
I can check back and provide some more specific.
Just thinking if there's a way to make sure that we're promoting that
Certainly.
as the use that it is.
Yep.
Good.
A lot of people still think, even in Spencer, that it's part of the Rowan Public Library.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be nice to have a sign that really jumps out, Spencer Library. I'm surprised this number of people still think.
It would be nice to sign it, just stating that as authorized president.
required. So
Anything else on library?
Okay, so then we're getting close to landing the bird here. In the Powell bill, we talked about resurfacing during your workshop. The Powell bill fund has an amount programmed in for resurfacing of about $120,000, and that is what we believe to be sufficient based on our current pricing estimates to purchase 720 tons of asphalt, which is the amount that was done during the last process. And so, of course, the included streets in the resurfacing program will be based on the pavement evaluation that was done and will be reviewed by the Board of Aldermen. Any questions? If I may, I'll just take a minute to conclude with the recommendation, and I'm going to read a little more deliberately from this last page because I don't know a better way to say it than the way we wrote it here. But Mayor Williams has encouraged us to run towards Spencer's vision, and this budget recommendation boldly embraces the vision while practicing good stewardship of the public investment entrusted to us. As we've talked about, the federal ARPA funding is allowing the town to move ahead on several one-time capital investments and also support several innovative programs and amenities. It's my hope that in a year from now, the fiscal year 24 budget recommendation will be supported by an expanded tax base made possible through development. We also will need to begin planning for new staff and operational costs on the horizon to support the variety of recreation improvements now in the planning stages. The countywide revaluation process takes place every 4 years, and as we described earlier, the property valuations as of January of 2023 will be effective with the budget starting in July of 2023. The residential property market we've experienced over the last few years will have an impact on this process, and it'll be important to ensure that our budget incorporates any growth we've experienced while limiting negative impacts on individual property owners. And so those are some thoughts about the future as we're thinking about today. But again, I want to express my appreciation to the mayor and the board for your vision and for your guidance, to our staff for their efforts in putting this recommendation together, and for the citizens who are continuing to assist us by providing feedback and partnering with us as we provide the services and that our outstanding staff do on a daily basis. So this is the fiscal year 23 budget recommendation as proposed by your humble town manager. It's neither final and it's not necessarily a reflection of what will be approved by the Board of Aldermen. I thank the mayor and the board for your consideration of this recommendation to arrive at what you consider the proper expenditure of available revenues for the upcoming year. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you very much.
So we'll open it up for comments from the board if there are any specific questions or any clarifications that are needed. Obviously, we're going to need time to digest this over the coming weeks. We will, at our June pre-agenda meeting, hold I'm sorry, is that the regular meeting in June, or is that the pre-agenda?
So we'll have a workshop opportunity at the pre-agenda. If there's any particular items you need us to provide you more information about, that would be a good time if you let us know between now and then, we can be prepared to follow up on any items you may have. At your regular meeting, we'll have a public hearing, and then you are free to adopt the budget at any point after that. So
as long as it's by the end of June.
Yes. And what we'd like to do is make sure that you have, ideally on the June 14th meeting, have a budget ordinance before you that, meet your expectations, whether it's as recommended or if any changes need to happen.
So I want to close us out, and we'll open it up then for comments from the board with just a couple of items. first of all, I want to thank Peter and Mr. Softly and all of the staff for working hard to put this together. I know, I was up here and saw the different department heads meeting, and a lot of time and effort went into this. One of the things I think that strikes me, that I think is going to jump out to a lot of people is this is a significantly larger budget than we have had in years past. And it's significantly larger for several reasons. One is it is larger because we have a significantly larger revenue stream than we have had in the past. And that is due to quite a few things, but it's due to some good fortune, some good planning, and several things like over $500,000, almost $600,000 in ARPA funding from the government that's going to allow us to do that. So that's a big chunk of it. The other piece is that we have seen significant increases in our sales tax, which is great. That's the type of thing we want to be seeing. Modest increases in our property taxes as well, and that's expected to continue into next fiscal year. The other thing that we also have to keep in mind is we have been the beneficiary of a lot of grant opportunities, and then we've recognized those this fiscal year, but those are projects that we're going to be moving forward with into construction next year, such as the Yadkin River Trailhead. So, while it looks like a considerably larger amount, and it's because there's a considerably larger amount of revenue coming in. And so one of the things I asked Peter earlier today, I said, I want to make sure that our budget is sustainable beyond just this year. Well, it is sustainable for the following year because we're going to get a second round of infusion from the ARPA funding as well. But I think we need to consider that we've all made a commitment to growing the town, growing our tax base, be it property taxes and sales base, growing our sales tax basis. That's going to continue as long as we are united in that vision and continuing to work to push that forward. Those things are going to continue to happen, and I think we are seeing the success of our previous board, and even the previous board before that, having a vision to bring us here, and everything start to revolve around this central hub in Spencer. And so those visions are starting to happen. And so, we need to be fiscally responsible. We need to be fiscally conservative with this. But what I will say is these are all necessary investments that we need to be making. What has happened in the past is that money has been put back into our back into our reserves and not used. And that's good to build our reserves, but there comes a limit that you don't need to continue building reserves if you're not using that money to reinvest in your community, because it's taxpayer money. It's money that our citizens and our businesses have paid to have an increased level of service, to have the amenities that they've said they want. And so my challenge to this board is we need to make sure that we are using that to reinvest in our community, that we're not serving as the Bank of Spencer, but that we are making things happen and making projects become reality and increasing the services and meeting all the needs of our citizens that we can. And we have the funding to be able to do that. And so if it scares you, my encouragement to you would be, this is our opportunity, right? And I said that, I think, in our strategic planning session, that, this is our moment. And so the path has been laid out, path is set before us. We have been incredibly fortunate that everything's landed the way it has over the last several years, and so it's time to run, and this is the start of how we make that happen. So just ask that you consider that, and I mentioned to Peter, it's going to be very important in how this message is conveyed to our community, because we're not raising taxes, we're not we're leveraging money that we're receiving. We're making better use of it. We're making purchases that are going to make us more efficient and safer as a community. Those are all really, really important things. And so we need to make sure that that message is heard loud and clear. That my opinion is these are very, very responsible uses of taxpayer money to enhance the level of service, to enhance the level of safety within our community, and to enhance enhance our community and our way of life in Spencer with the events and the services and things like that that we're providing. So with that, I'll open it up for comments or questions from other board members.
I've got two things really that have to do with both the library and potential as we grow. I see that somewhere along the line we're probably going to need a Parks and Recreation department, and it would encompass events as well. And two, for the library, I think, we've talked about this probably for a couple of years, but I still think that the library is that undiscovered diamond in the rough. It's right there, right here in the heart of town, and I think it's way underutilized, especially the upper floor. And I think that that should be considered in the long run as a potential area for maybe a community center, putting an elevator to make it handicap accessible. If not the library, then certainly some other building that's already in existence here in Spencer. And also a third thing, and to tie back into Parks and Recreation, is I would like to see us get, whenever the opportunity arises and the money is available, to acquire maybe bits and pieces of property that we could turn into parks, or a picnic area or something like that, to make our neighborhoods more friendlier by providing more green space, available green space for usage, things like that.
So you're talking like pocket parks.
Yeah, things like that. But this is very good, very thorough, very thorough.
Thank you. Other comments, Mr. Miller?
Well, let me add something to what he's talking about on the library. It is underutilized, but also the area outside the park is underutilized. And if we ever do get a park out here, it will definitely be underutilized. And I thought some of the things that we decided we weren't going to put out here at the park, maybe we could add to the library park, like a exercise room, or not an exercise room, but an exercise area where you can exercise or something like that. I know they don't want to destroy the integrity of the looks of the park and everything else, but it'd be nice to have yoga classes or something like that, something to utilize that space, because all you're doing is people are just walking through there with their dogs, basically. I hate to say it, but that's it. So I would like to see that park utilized more so. I mean, he's right, you do that, but I think we need to utilize that park more so, and we don't offer anything for recreation in that park.
That's a great thought, yoga lawn, as long as it's not goat yoga.
That's the first thing I could think of. Let me say one other thing, and then I'll shut up. One thing that I don't think we're looking at, and we've already seen it in the last 6 months, 3 things that's kind of bit us in the butt, and that is stormwater. And I'm not talking about 17th Street. I'm talking about repairing existing stormwater. We've had 3 different aspects, and I know Joel's just now finishing up over there near the library. That's 3 incidents. One of them, we used the power bill to help us offset over on Forestdale, and that's something that as the town gets older, these facilities, the underground facilities we don't see, are wearing out, and we're fortunate that we got people like Joel and Chad that can get down there and work like a dog and make improvements where if we had a contractor out there, that probably, what they did the other day would probably cost at least $10,000.
So I want to speak to that because one of the
Yeah,
things that has been proposed is a capital reserve fund. And so whereas we have our just standard reserve in our general fund, is actually breaking a piece of that off that's going to be solely dedicated to capital needs and
Okay.
capital replacement.
Yeah.
So that then every year we're funding into that so that we have a capital reserve for exactly the sort of thing that you're talking about, whether it be an emergency fix that
Yeah.
needs to happen or it be some larger planned capital investment that needs to happen. But absolutely, as we have aging infrastructure, we need to have some type of fund that's available that we can rely on to address issues like that. And honestly, to the point that we're proactive about it and not having to be reactive like we have had to be recently. And that goes back to this concept of a capital improvement plan. And I think Peter outlined that in this. Eventually, we want to get to the point that we know all of those needs that are likely, where we are likely going to have a culvert that's going to fail because we've CCTV'd it and we've seen what's going on with it, and we can go in and proactively replace it before it actually fails. So that is something that we are doing to plan
That's
to
good,
address
because
that.
I wasn't sure what we're doing, but that is going to be a major expense, especially as much rain as I know we've had a lot of rain in the last 24, 46 hours or 48 hours.
And I do want to point out, we got a notification. I'm sure I don't want to steal Joe's thunder, but we did have notification today that the grant that we applied for through the Soil and Water Conservation District for debris removal, that we were successful in
Good,
that.
good.
They're not able
That's
to fund the full amount of the request because they had about 10 times the number, the funding requests than they had available funding. But there's probably going to be another round that comes out, but it's at least a start. That we
That's
can
good.
start addressing some of
That's
those
great.
issues.
Great. Just as long as we're thinking about that in the future, because like I said, we've had 3 episodes in the last 6 months, and that's going to start mounting up to be very expensive. And I definitely think we need to at least program a little bit of the money put aside for that. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Other comments or questions?
I'm delighted to see the improvement in those investment earnings. Because I mean, I looked at those numbers and I thought that can't be right, and you've just reiterated that that figure is right. So I'm really pleased.
And the
to see
reason
that.
for that is interest rate hikes,
right?
Because most of it's money market investments, and so as the Fed has hiked interest rates, our earnings have gone up. Good news is those are investments that are fairly secure investments. It's not like they're in the stock market per se, and so we're getting interest earning off of it that we haven't gotten over the last several years.
The other thing that I've wondered about is, as we see development move toward us, are we going to need to be faced with incentives?
So the answer, and I'm looking right at Steve Blunt, the answer is absolutely yes.
Where would that kind of money come from?
Well, typically it isn't money that we put up front. It's basically money in that tax incentives are, we are deferring taxes for a period of time for those corporations that come in. And typically that's in partnership with the county and the EDC, that there's an agreement on what that might look like. And I believe we're going to have a presentation at our upcoming meeting specifically about that concept.
And just to add, I mean, the short of incentives is the taxes actually get paid in full.
And rebate.
And well, I wouldn't go so far to use even that word, but there's a grant that's based on the taxes paid and the investment. It results in a net gain. So if say you have an 85% grant program, you get and say you get $10 of taxes, and the grant is $8.50. Well, you have $1.50 that you didn't have before. So it pays for itself.
The other thing to keep in mind is, and we're having these discussions now because of the type of development pressure and requests that we're getting, but typically those incentives come with expectations that the developers are putting in infrastructure
Right.
that's going to serve that industry, but also allow the eventual tie on in certain locations. So, for instance, if a developer comes in off a Long Ferry Road in that area, there's certain utility and access challenges that they would have that with an incentive-based program, the expectation would be that they're going to fund the access that goes in as well as the utilities that then down the road actually serves to the benefit of others that may come along after that.
And so we wouldn't actually be putting in the water lines, the sewer lines for the development.
Correct.
Okay.
Unless we want to upsize them for future service for some other reason.
Right.
That would be how we would do that.
Okay.
Yeah, there's been a lot of publicity about incentives, and we're starting to see that because of the development. The reality is incentives are the only way that you can attract strong, large businesses. And really it's gotten to the point that who can put together the best package. And so if you're not playing in the incentive arena, you're going to get passed over for those that development. It's just plain and simple. What we need to make sure we're doing is doing it thoughtfully, that we're doing it not willy-nilly, that we're doing it such that we're making smart investments of those tax incentives to bring the right companies. And the right companies are those that are going to provide people in our community with jobs, that are going to provide people in outside communities job opportunities that will cause them to move to this area, and that are going to increase not only our property tax base down the road, but more importantly, our sales tax base. Mm-hmm. So, for instance, if there is a manufacturing facility that comes in, we're going to have the benefit of sales tax of whatever product they're manufacturing that's going out. We're going to recoup that benefit. Plus, we're going to be creating jobs for citizens in our community and beyond, and then hopefully encouraging folks that want to move to our community. So really, it's a win-win. It's just making sure that we're not giving the farm away, if you will, in doing it. Did I say that correctly? I spared you the memo. You're welcome.
How about that?
Deferred the memo.
I think that was all I had.
Okay.
I think the question.
Other comments or questions?
I have one, and it's something I think we talked about maybe, again, a couple of meetings with Kyle. He was talking about, I guess, expansion or the increase in the grant program for the historic properties and the older homes. And I think, I told him then I liked where his mind was going, but we're going to $25,000 is a lot of money, and that's great. And I absolutely support that, but I would like, as I asked him then, whenever we come to presenting that, we're ready to award that at some point later next year, see that, I think, publicized and available to more people. Not just maybe the folks who, and I know that's pie in the sky and esoteric to some degree, but I know we have a lot of older homes, a lot of folks who maybe don't have availability to sophistication in terms of reading documents and contracts and understanding I spend this, I get this back, that kind of thing. I just, when I asked him, kind of pushed him on what's the process, I felt like it was not very accessible. And that's not his fault. I mean, that's not, I think he's doing a great job. But I just think we need to make sure for appropriating that kind of money, that it's available and that people out there know about it, know how to access it, and it's plain language. This is what you do. This is what you get. This is what we need from you, and that we're guiding that. And I'm not saying we're not doing that. That's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm asking. But I just want to make sure that's clear. I guess that there's a commitment to making sure that's available to as broad a group as possible, and that it reaches many people who might need that. I know when we did the thing Saturday, those were not really. I think a lot of our older homes or maybe historic homes, but not necessarily the kind of home maybe you think about in the quote historic district, but homes that would benefit from, grant, money or improvements, thought improvements, that kind of thing.
One of the initiatives that was programmed in for the Historic Preservation Commission, they're interested in doing a separate mailer for historic district residents to talk about the updated standards process, but it could include other things like this as well. And so that is something that is part of the budget recommendation, is to accommodate that. And just to make sure we're clear on the 25,000 that was talking, that was noted, I think, are you referring to the supplanted funds list? That is being recommended towards the business incubator program.
Now, this is
Yeah.
page 10 on the key recommendation at the top, governing body, which
Yes.
says funding for variety of initiatives,
The 10,000 commercial and historic.
and then the 25 too.
The 25-2, I think, is for all. It includes Community Appearance Commission, the HPC,
Yes.
and so it's not just for this
So-
grant program.
Okay,
That's
okay,
correct.
all right, okay.
Yes, so
okay.
the each of those grant programs are recommended at the $10,000 level that are in the current year budget, and those together plus other items is what totals the 25.
Okay, so they were actually not expanding anything yet.
Correct.
This was okay. There we go. I'm glad you. Well, still, my comment remains. I know
Sure.
with 10,000, maybe it's hard to do, but comment remains that I think we need to make sure those are as broadly available as possible.
Certainly.
So, Andrew, I think you hit the nail on the head, and it comes to all of these exciting things that we're doing, opportunities for our residents and our businesses, that we're doing everything we can to market these opportunities, right? We're talking about communication and outreach. This is truly marketing these opportunities to our communities. And I think we do a good job of that, but I do think that there is always room for improvement in that area so that people can take advantage of these opportunities, which are neat. Yeah, they really are. And I know a lot of communities do these types of things, but I don't know how many communities the size of Spencer are doing these type of things for their citizens and businesses.
We truly have accomplished a lot as far as appearance is concerned in Spencer. And I think we need to be sure that we're kind of blowing our own horn saying, look, how much better it looks than it did 4 years ago.
There's work to be done, and there will always be. If there's not work to be done, none of us need to be here.
Right.
But you're absolutely right. I think we do need to make sure that the folks are reminded of the progress, because I think it's really easy to sit around in the communities where we live because we're there so much and kind of become complacent about the changes about us
And not even see it.
That's exactly
But
right.
boy, people out in the county are seeing it, because everywhere I go, people are asking me, what's going on in Spencer? What are y'all doing out there? I mean, they just go on and on and on.
Yeah.
And a lot of it's been the good publicity we've had in the paper, and the articles that have been in there, and the plans that we, and they're coming to fruition. People are excited about it, and I am too. It's hard to get me excited.
Well, I will say we've got a team and our town staff that have really just embraced the vision of each of you, and you're working to move it forward, and it's an exciting time. Any other comments from the board or questions? All right. Well, hearing none, that concludes the budget presentation. Again, we will have a work session at our pre-agenda meeting in June.
That's next week, right? First Thursday?
We have no,
Yeah, it's 2 weeks.
June 9th.
Okay.
June 9th is the pre-agenda, and June 14th would be the regular meeting.
Right.
I better write that down.
It's the Thursday before the
Okay.
second Tuesday.
Correct.
We've got a late second Tuesday
June
this month.
9th is pre-agenda.
And so we have a bit of a situation in that Mr. Miller will not be present for the pre-agenda or the regular agenda meeting in June. I will not be present for the pre-agenda meeting. I will be here for the regular agenda meeting.
And I won't be here for pre-agenda either.
All right,
Okay.
so
I'm going on a much needed
don't
vacation.
anybody else go anywhere. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. We will have a quorum. We'll have 4. We'll have 4 of the aldermen and only 2 absent.
Now,
So
we
will-
have public hearings that night as well, right?
No, the public hearing is the regular meeting. We have a budget workshop on the pre-agenda night
Uh-huh,
and on June
okay.
on June 9th.
The planning related public hearings are scheduled for the night.
Okay.
For the pre-agenda meeting. So it is important that everybody else can be here and that you'll have.
I'll be
Thank you.
And if anybody wants to join by Zoom, we can always accommodate
Which I
that
may,
as well.
yeah, and I may do that. I'll just need you to preside.
The incognito.
Okay.
Part of the
That'd be
Witness
wonderful.
Protection
Thanks.
Program.
I will absolutely try.
Right out of my mouth.
Okay.
All right. Anything else?
Sometime between now and then, I'd like for somebody to explain all this, all the numbers on the page. But I can talk
I'd
to
be
you about
happy to.
that.
Yeah, and one of the suggestions I was going to have is between now and that point is to review this. The questions that you do have, you'll compile those and then coordinate with Peter to find the time to come up and meet with him and talk through those questions with him directly.
I read through a lot of it today, but I didn't get all of it.
Okay. All right. We've reached the end of the agenda. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So we adjourn.
Mr. Muhammad beat you to it.
Now second.
All right. Motion by Mr. Muhammad, second by Mr. Morgan. All in favor? All right. All opposed? And we stand adjourned. Thank you all very, very much.
7:16.
Thank you, sir.